One of the most powerful things you can do when dealing with a narcissistic person is to stop reacting. This may sound simple on the surface, but in reality, it requires tremendous emotional strength, self-control, and wisdom. Most people underestimate just how much power is hidden in a calm response or in no response at all. A narcissist often studies people carefully. They learn what makes you angry, what makes you defensive, what makes you feel guilty, and what causes you to question yourself. Once they discover those emotional triggers, they use them strategically. Their goal is often not to solve a problem or create understanding. Their goal is to maintain influence. As long as they can control your emotions, they feel connected to a source of power. They know that if they can make you upset, they can occupy your thoughts. If they can make you angry, they can dictate your mood. If they can make you defend yourself endlessly, they can keep you trapped in a cycle that revolves around them. This is why many narcissistic individuals seem strangely energized during conflict. While healthy people seek resolution, narcissists often seek reaction. They may criticize you unfairly, twist your words, ignore your feelings, create unnecessary drama, or make accusations that have little basis in reality. To an outsider, their behavior can seem irrational, but there is often a hidden purpose behind it. They are fishing for an emotional response. They want to see frustration. They want to see tears. They want to see anger. They want proof that they still have access to your emotional world. The moment you understand this dynamic, everything begins to change. You start realizing that every emotional reaction is a form of attention. Every argument is an investment of energy. Every attempt to explain yourself to someone determined to misunderstand you becomes a drain on your peace. This doesn't mean that expressing emotions is wrong. Healthy emotions are a natural and necessary part of life. The problem arises when someone deliberately uses your emotions as tools for manipulation. When that happens, reacting exactly as they expect only strengthens the unhealthy cycle. Think about a fire that depends on oxygen to keep burning. As long as oxygen continues to flow, the flames remain alive. But when the oxygen supply is removed, the fire begins to weaken. In much the same way, a narcissist's attempts at control often depend on emotional fuel. Your outrage becomes fuel. Your desperation becomes fuel. Your need to be understood becomes fuel. Your endless explanations become fuel. When you stop providing that fuel, the dynamic begins to shift. Many people mistakenly believe that refusing to react means becoming passive or weak. The truth is exactly the opposite. Reacting is often the easiest thing to do because it requires no discipline. Anyone can lash out when provoked. Anyone can send an angry message in the heat of the moment. Anyone can become consumed by frustration when treated unfairly. But remaining calm when someone is intentionally trying to disturb your peace requires maturity. It requires emotional intelligence. It requires the ability to pause between the trigger and the response. There is something deeply unsettling to a narcissist about a person who remains composed. When they expect an argument and receive silence, they become confused. When they expect outrage and receive calmness, they become frustrated. When they expect you to chase after their approval and you simply continue living your life, they begin losing their sense of control. They are accustomed to predictable reactions. They know how to navigate conflict because conflict is often the environment where they feel most powerful. What they struggle with is emotional independence. They struggle with people who refuse to play the game. This doesn't mean you never speak. It doesn't mean you never address problems. It doesn't mean you allow yourself to be mistreated. It simply means that your actions are no longer controlled by their behavior. You stop allowing their mood to determine your mood. You stop allowing their criticism to define your self-worth. You stop allowing their manipulation to dictate your decisions. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond intentionally. Instead of giving away your peace, you protect it. Over time, this shift produces remarkable changes within you. You begin noticing that you have more emotional energy. You sleep better because you're no longer replaying every argument in your mind. You become more confident because you're no longer seeking validation from someone committed to withholding it. You gain clarity because you're no longer distracted by constant emotional chaos. Most importantly, you start remembering who you are apart from the drama. The greatest victory is not watching a narcissist become frustrated. The greatest victory is reclaiming ownership of your inner world. It is reaching a place where your happiness is no longer dependent on someone else's approval. It is developing the strength to remain centered even when others are determined to pull you into conflict. It is learning that peace is not something another person gives you. It is something you choose to protect. When you stop reacting, you send a message that requires no words. You communicate that your emotions are no longer available for manipulation. You communicate that your peace is valuable. You communicate that your focus is now on growth rather than conflict. And while a narcissist may never admit it, there are few things more powerful than encountering someone they can no longer control. In that moment, the chains of manipulation begin to break, and a new chapter of freedom begins to unfold. The second powerful way to completely disrupt a narcissist's influence without saying a word is to become unavailable for manipulation. This concept goes much deeper than simply limiting contact or ignoring messages. It involves making a conscious decision that your time, energy, attention, and emotional well-being are valuable resources that can no longer be accessed and controlled by someone else's demands. Narcissistic individuals often develop an unspoken expectation that they should have unrestricted access to the people around them. They may believe they are entitled to your immediate attention, your constant availability, your emotional support, and your willingness to accommodate their needs regardless of the cost to your own well-being. Over time, this expectation can create a dynamic where your life begins revolving around their moods, desires, and priorities. Many people do not recognize this pattern at first because it develops gradually. What begins as a small request can evolve into a constant expectation. You may find yourself answering every call immediately because you fear their reaction if you do not. You may rearrange your schedule to avoid disappointing them. You may postpone your own goals, responsibilities, or personal needs because keeping them satisfied has become a priority. Little by little, your boundaries begin to disappear. What makes this situation particularly challenging is that narcissists often condition people to feel guilty whenever they attempt to establish healthy limits. The moment you start protecting your time, they may accuse you of being selfish, uncaring, disrespectful, or ungrateful. Their goal is not necessarily to understand your perspective. Their goal is often to pressure you back into the role they have assigned to you. A narcissist thrives when they believe they can reach into your life whenever they choose and immediately receive a response. This creates a sense of control. They become accustomed to the idea that your attention is always available and that your priorities can be pushed aside whenever theirs takes center stage. When you consistently make yourself available under these conditions, you unintentionally reinforce the belief that they have unlimited access to your life. The problem is that unlimited access rarely leads to respect. Instead, it often leads to increased demands, greater expectations, and deeper levels of entitlement. The moment you begin valuing your own time, everything starts to change. You recognize that your schedule matters, your goals matter, your responsibilities matter, your peace matters. You stop treating your own life as something that must constantly be interrupted to accommodate another person's desires. This shift may seem small from the outside, but internally it represents a major transformation. You are no longer viewing yourself as an extension of someone else's needs. You are recognizing yourself as an individual with your own priorities, dreams, and boundaries. One of the reasons this change frustrates narcissistic individuals is because it introduces something they dislike: limits. Healthy people understand that limits are a normal part of relationships. They understand that everyone has responsibilities, commitments, and personal needs. They respect the fact that other people cannot always be available. Narcissists, however, often view boundaries as obstacles. They may interpret your limits as rejection because your independence challenges their sense of control. The more accustomed they have become to unrestricted access, the more uncomfortable they may feel when that access begins to disappear. Becoming unavailable for manipulation does not require dramatic announcements or emotional confrontations. In fact, some of the most powerful boundaries are established quietly. You stop explaining every decision. You stop justifying every choice. You stop feeling obligated to defend your need for personal space. Instead, you calmly live according to your values. You answer when it is appropriate. You engage when it is healthy. You decline when necessary. You protect your energy without feeling guilty for doing so. This approach often creates confusion because narcissists are accustomed to people responding predictably. They expect immediate availability. They expect emotional urgency. They expect others to prioritize their needs above everything else. When those expectations are no longer met, they may attempt different tactics to regain control. They might become more demanding. They might increase criticism. They might try guilt, anger, charm, or emotional manipulation. These reactions often reveal how dependent they were on unrestricted access in the first place. What is important to understand is that boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. They are not acts of hostility. They are acts of self-respect. A healthy boundary does not exist to hurt another person. It exists to preserve your well-being. Many people hesitate to establish boundaries because they fear appearing selfish. However, there is a significant difference between selfishness and self-respect. Selfishness ignores the needs of others. Self-respect acknowledges that your needs matter too. As you become unavailable for manipulation, something remarkable begins happening inside you. You discover how much energy was previously being consumed by unnecessary drama, emotional pressure, and constant demands. You begin reclaiming hours that were once spent managing someone else's emotions. You gain mental clarity because your attention is no longer divided by endless attempts to keep another person satisfied. You start investing that energy into your own growth, relationships, goals, and well-being. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of this transformation is that it teaches you an important lesson about your own worth. You learn that your value does not come from how available you are to someone else's demands. You learn that being a good person does not require sacrificing your peace. You learn that healthy relationships can survive boundaries because genuine respect does not depend on unlimited access. Most importantly, you discover that protecting your time and energy is not an act of rejection toward others. It is an act of responsibility toward yourself. Without speaking a single word, your actions begin communicating a powerful truth. You are no longer willing to abandon your own needs to maintain someone else's control. You are no longer available for manipulation disguised as obligation. You are no longer willing to surrender your peace for the sake of keeping another person comfortable. Your life is no longer organized around their demands. Instead, it is guided by your values, your purpose, and your commitment to emotional health. And that quiet shift in availability often becomes one of the clearest signs that their influence over you is beginning to fade. The third powerful way to completely disrupt a narcissist's influence without saying a word is to thrive without their approval. This is often one of the most difficult steps because many people who have spent significant time around a narcissistic individual have unknowingly been conditioned to seek validation from them. At first, the desire for approval may seem completely normal. Everyone wants to feel appreciated, respected, and valued by the people in their lives. The problem arises when approval becomes a tool of control. Narcissistic individuals often create an environment where acceptance feels conditional. They may praise you one day and criticize you the next. They may celebrate your success when it benefits them, but diminish it when it highlights your independence. They may offer just enough encouragement to keep you seeking more while never providing the consistent support that healthy relationships are built upon. This creates a frustrating cycle. You work harder, hoping to finally earn their respect. You explain yourself more clearly, hoping they will understand. You make sacrifices, hoping they will appreciate your efforts. You chase an approval that always seems just out of reach. No matter how much progress you make, there is often another criticism waiting. No matter how much you accomplish, there is another flaw they are ready to point out. What many people fail to realize is that the goalpost is constantly moving. The issue is not that you have failed to earn their approval. The issue is that keeping you dependent on their approval gives them influence. A narcissist often gains power when they become the primary source of validation in your life. If your confidence rises and falls based on their opinion, they possess tremendous control over your emotional state. If your sense of worth depends on their recognition, they can shape your behavior simply by offering or withholding praise. This is why breaking free from the need for their approval is such a profound act of personal growth. It removes one of the strongest tools of manipulation from their hands. The journey toward thriving without approval begins when you recognize that your value is not determined by another person's opinion. This sounds simple, but for many people, it requires a complete shift in perspective. You begin understanding that your worth existed before they entered your life and will continue to exist regardless of what they think about you. Their inability to recognize your value does not diminish your value. Their criticism does not define your character. Their approval is not the final authority on your identity. As this realization grows, you start making decisions based on principles rather than validation. Instead of asking whether someone will approve, you ask whether the decision aligns with your values. Instead of measuring your success by their reaction, you measure it by your own growth and progress. This shift is incredibly empowering because it places responsibility for your self-worth back where it belongs with you. One of the reasons this transformation is so unsettling to a narcissist is because they often expect people to remain emotionally dependent. They become accustomed to being consulted on every decision, sought after for every opinion, and relied upon for every sense of validation. When someone begins developing confidence from within, that dependency starts disappearing. Suddenly, their criticism loses its impact. Their disapproval loses its ability to control behavior. Their attempts to undermine confidence become less effective because the foundation of self-worth is no longer built upon their approval. Thriving without approval also changes the way you approach success. Instead of pursuing achievements to prove something to another person, you pursue them because they align with your goals and purpose. Your motivation becomes internal rather than external. You stop viewing your accomplishments as evidence in a case you are trying to present to a critic. You start viewing them as milestones in your own personal journey. This creates a healthier and more sustainable form of confidence because it is not dependent on someone else's reaction. There is something deeply liberating about no longer needing permission to become who you are meant to be. Many people spend years waiting for validation before pursuing their dreams. They wait for someone to believe in them. They wait for encouragement. They wait for approval. Unfortunately, when that approval comes from a narcissistic individual, it may never arrive in the way they hope. The danger of waiting is that valuable years can be lost while seeking recognition from someone who benefits from keeping you uncertain. The moment you stop waiting, your life begins moving forward again. You take action even when others doubt you. You continue growing even when your efforts are ignored. You keep pursuing your purpose even when no applause is offered. This quiet determination becomes a source of strength because it teaches you that progress does not require universal approval. Growth can happen without validation. Success can happen without recognition. Healing can happen without permission. As your confidence increases, another important change takes place. You become less vulnerable to manipulation. Narcissists often exploit insecurities because insecurities create opportunities for control. When you constantly question your worth, you become more susceptible to criticism, guilt, and emotional pressure. But when you develop a healthy sense of self-respect, those tactics lose much of their effectiveness. You no longer need constant reassurance because your confidence is grounded in something deeper than external opinions. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of thriving without approval is the peace it brings. You stop exhausting yourself trying to convince someone of your value. You stop carrying the burden of proving your worth. You stop allowing another person's judgment to dictate how you feel about yourself. Instead, you focus your energy on becoming the best version of who you are. You invest in your growth, your healing, your relationships, and your purpose. Your attention shifts away from earning approval and toward building a meaningful life. Without speaking a single word, this transformation communicates a message that cannot be ignored. It reveals that your confidence no longer depends on their validation. It shows that your future is no longer tied to their opinion. It demonstrates that your identity is no longer shaped by their criticism or controlled by their approval. You are no longer standing before them seeking permission to move forward. You are already moving forward. And in that quiet act of thriving, you reclaim a freedom that no manipulative person can ever take away. The fourth powerful way to completely disrupt a narcissist's influence without saying a word is to protect your peace. This may sound simple, but it is one of the most challenging and transformative decisions a person can make. Many people who have spent years dealing with narcissistic behavior become so accustomed to conflict, confusion, and emotional turbulence that they begin to view chaos as a normal part of life. They wake up expecting drama, they brace themselves for criticism, they anticipate arguments before conversations even begin. Over time, this constant state of emotional alertness becomes exhausting. It drains energy, weakens confidence, and steals joy from everyday life. What many people do not realize is that protecting peace is not a passive act. It is an intentional choice that requires courage, wisdom, and self-respect. A narcissist often thrives in environments filled with confusion and instability. Chaos serves a purpose because it keeps people distracted and emotionally off balance. When someone is constantly trying to understand mixed messages, shifting expectations, contradictory statements, or emotional outbursts, they have less energy available for personal growth. Their focus becomes consumed by managing the relationship rather than improving their own life. The narcissist benefits from this dynamic because attention remains centered on them. As long as you are trying to solve the latest conflict, explain yourself once again, or recover from another emotional attack, your energy continues flowing in their direction. This is why protecting your peace becomes such a powerful response. It breaks the cycle of constant emotional engagement. Instead of allowing someone else's behavior to determine the atmosphere of your life, you begin creating an environment where calmness, clarity, and emotional stability are priorities. You stop participating in every argument. You stop responding to every provocation. You stop feeling responsible for managing another person's emotions. Rather than chasing resolution in situations designed to create confusion, you focus on preserving your mental and emotional well-being. One of the greatest misconceptions about peace is that it means the absence of problems. In reality, peace is not determined by circumstances. It is determined by how you respond to circumstances. There will always be difficult people. There will always be challenges. There will always be situations that test your patience. The difference is that you no longer allow those situations to dominate your inner world. You recognize that not every battle deserves your participation. You understand that some conflicts cannot be resolved because the other person is not seeking resolution. They are seeking reaction. A narcissist often expects access to your emotional state. They expect to be able to provoke frustration, guilt, fear, or anger whenever they choose. When you consistently react, they learn that controlling the atmosphere of your life is possible. But when you begin protecting your peace, they encounter something unfamiliar, resistance without confrontation. You are no longer giving them unrestricted access to your emotions. You are no longer allowing every criticism to become a crisis or every disagreement to become a major conflict. This quiet refusal to engage in unnecessary drama often becomes deeply frustrating for someone who depends on emotional chaos to maintain influence. Protecting your peace also requires learning the difference between responsibility and ownership. Many people dealing with narcissistic individuals carry burdens that were never theirs to carry. They feel responsible for fixing every problem, preventing every conflict, and maintaining every relationship. They assume ownership of issues that belong to someone else. If the narcissist is angry, they feel obligated to make them happy. If the narcissist is upset, they feel obligated to restore their mood. If the narcissist creates drama, they feel obligated to resolve it. This pattern creates emotional exhaustion because no one can successfully manage another person's internal world. The moment you realize that every person is responsible for their own emotions, a tremendous weight begins to lift. You stop feeling obligated to rescue someone from consequences they created. You stop believing that your purpose is to keep everyone comfortable. You stop sacrificing your well-being to solve problems that do not belong to you. This shift allows peace to enter areas of life that were previously consumed by stress and anxiety. Another important aspect of protecting your peace is becoming selective about where your energy goes. Energy is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Every conversation, every thought, every emotional reaction requires energy. The problem is that many people invest enormous amounts of energy into situations that produce no positive outcome. They replay arguments in their minds. They rehearse explanations they will never have the opportunity to give. They obsess over unfair treatment and search endlessly for understanding from people unwilling to provide it. While this is happening, valuable energy is being diverted away from personal growth, meaningful relationships, and purposeful living. When you begin protecting your peace, you become more intentional. You ask yourself whether a conversation is worth having. You consider whether an argument will accomplish anything productive. You evaluate whether a particular situation deserves your attention. Instead of automatically engaging, you make conscious choices about where your emotional resources are invested. This discipline creates greater clarity because your mind is no longer overwhelmed by unnecessary conflict. The remarkable thing about peace is that it often reveals truths that chaos conceals. When emotional drama becomes constant, it can be difficult to see situations clearly. Feelings become tangled. Priorities become confused. Decisions become reactive rather than thoughtful. But when peace is protected, perspective improves. You begin recognizing unhealthy patterns that once seemed normal. You notice manipulation more quickly. You identify toxic dynamics more clearly. You become less vulnerable because your judgment is no longer clouded by constant emotional pressure. A narcissist may interpret your peace as indifference. They may interpret your boundaries as rejection. They may become frustrated because their usual methods no longer produce the same results. Yet the purpose of protecting your peace is not to change them. It is to preserve yourself. It is not about winning a battle. It is about refusing to live in a state of perpetual conflict. It is about recognizing that your mental and emotional well-being deserve protection. Without speaking a single word, protecting your peace communicates something powerful. It shows that your calmness is no longer negotiable. It reveals that your emotional stability is not available for manipulation. It demonstrates that you have stopped measuring your life by someone else's chaos and started measuring it by your own growth. The noise that once consumed your attention no longer controls your focus. The drama that once dictated your emotions no longer determines your state of mind. Your peace becomes a quiet declaration that your well-being matters, your boundaries matter, and your future is too valuable to be sacrificed on the altar of endless conflict.